Are you ready?
Uh-oh.
Hey, think you can tell us what to do?
BirdGang Weekly is live.
Think you can tell us
And
what
ladies
to
and
do?
gentlemen, we have a lot to talk about.
You think that you're
Thank you for joining us. I'm your host,
better get
Jeffrey Knox. That's my government. Most of y'all know me as GQ. The gang is live. Let's get it. We got a lot to discuss. And over the span of 60 minutes, I don't know if we'll have time to get it all. And most of the time when I tell you we'll discuss something, we go totally off script and we lose total focus with what we're supposed to be discussing. Right now, we've been on the air for less than 60 seconds. I've already gotten 3 notifications.
think you can tell me what
So welcome to the broadcast. Listen to us live via Thunderstorm Media.
who you're talking
Spreaker.com/user Thunderstorm Media. Follow us on the new IG page, Thunderstorm Media, and on Twitter at Storm Radio 66. Follow me daily on Inside the Eagles on the Fan-Sided Network. I'm the co-editor, site expert. I'm also a future Pro Bowler. That's if somebody wants to give me a chance. The Pro Bowl is just name recognition anyway.
like you're a little man.
It's just voting for guys that you see as popular. You find the name you recognize, you vote for it.
Break it down.
Snubs every year, and I feel I'm one of them. But I tell you what we will discuss today. We're going to talk about Josina Anderson and Howard Eskin. He's still alive. We're going to talk a little Sidney Jones. And we got to give out a Petty Wop Award. And if you've been listening and paying attention to football for the last 2 days, I'm pretty sure you already figured out who I'm going to give it to.
Know who you're talking to.
Welcome to the broadcast. Welcome to a new era in Eagles Talk Radio. Welcome to my show. I've cleared the room. It's just me and a couple of producers here. And it's time to get rowdy. I love that D-Generation X. Shout out to the WWE. Not quite the product that we're used to seeing from the WWE. They're failing to make stars now, so they just bring Owen back. Their opener on SmackDown last night consisted of Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, and The Miz. That's just awful product. Not thinking that Fox is going to stick with his WWE idea too much longer. Welcome to the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot to discuss today. And I'm sure if you're an Eagles fan, you've been paying attention. I'm sure if you're an Eagles fan, you're a little frustrated. Your favorite team has turned into the Dallas Cowboys. Drama is everywhere. If they're not anonymous sources who won the Petty Wop Award last week, I can't keep a secret, man. If it's not anonymous sources, it's former players. That might have been a spoiler alert for the Petty Wop Award this week. Speaking of petty, let's talk a little Howard Eskin. NBC Sports Philadelphia reported, if most of you weren't able to hear it live, Howard Eskin went on air and basically agreed with something I said. He thought Alshon Jeffrey was the anonymous source. Now let me both clarify something and defend Alshon Jeffrey a little bit. To Howard Eskin's credit, let's start with his comments. This story comes courtesy of Enrico Campitelli of NBC Sports Philadelphia. And he writes, Signs of dysfunction in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room began to show late last week when ESPN's Josina quoted an anonymous Eagles player criticizing Carson Wentz and the Birds offense. That made quite a few people angry, myself included. I took the air and I said, if you're going to talk about somebody, you should walk across the locker room and say what you had to say to that man's face. Orlando Scandrick. I don't know if I'll be able to make it 60 minutes before I give out the Petty Whop Award. I said when we were talking about the anonymous source last week that a man should stand by his words. I said a man should walk across the locker room and say whatever he has to say to the other man. And I also said that I had a hunch based on previous relationship and several conversations that I've seen them from afar have with one another. It seemed to me that Alshon Jeffrey and Josina Anderson were close. So it wouldn't have surprised me just in one train of thought without taking the time to actually try to figure this out and look at other people. I assumed that there was a conversation between Alshon Jeffrey and Josina Anderson again. Now, I've never met the woman personally. I don't know anything about her other than what I've seen on television, but I will say this. I've heard the same thing about her from a few other people. Some know her, some don't. And what she likes to do, and what Howard Eskin said was, she likes to back people into a corner by asking tough questions, get you to a point where you're stuck, and then she takes that answer and runs with it. That may have been what happened to Alshon Jeffrey. So let me defend him in that sense. But once you're backed into a corner, at some point you have to realize, you know what, I may have said too much, I'm going to stop. Whether it be Alshon Jeffrey or not, the anonymous player kept talking. So Eskin took the air. He named that guy to be Eskin. He called him foolish and stupid. And in a conversation he had with 94 Whip FM's morning show host, Angelo Cataldi, Eskin said this. The thing is, here's why he's foolish and stupid. He know that she's not out to have his back. The problem is, as a reporter, I've seen her do this. She'll bait a guy, and then the guy gets trapped into saying things, and he says them. It's just foolish and stupid. We all understand it's not productive. But what benefit was there to say that? And the reality is, why would he worry about a defensive player, quotation, Jalen Ramsey, not being traded for? And when he talks about checking down, sometimes the back you check down to is blocked. Or he's blocking, and then you can't get off the block. That's one of your check downs. So the whole thing was just stupid. But it's not being productive for somebody like that. I disagree with that on one sense. The Eagles are always checking the ball down. If any pass goes over the course of 30 yards ever since Deshaun Jackson's been hurt, it goes to Miles Sanders. Everything else is glorified check down if it's not an intentional one. Guys can't get deep. Guys can't get open. Heck, they can't catch when they do get open. And that's a very concerning part about this offense. The lack of Deshaun Jackson can't mean the death of this offense for the remainder of this season or until Deshaun gets back. Very, very concerning stuff. Alshon has denied the allegations of being the anonymous source. Josina Anderson defended her source in a tweet. He has zero knowledge of who I spoke to, #0. So, as a result, there's been a little bit of a media firestorm in Philadelphia. Howard Eskin went at certain members of the Philly Voice. The Philly Voice responded. Howard Eskin has used words like fake news and voodoo journalism. He even challenged writer Joe Santolo Liquido, I believe his name is. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But he challenged him to a lie detector test. And the question remains, why are we talking about this stuff rather than football? These are things that we would expect from that team down in Texas. Drama, infighting, too loud, talking to the media, talking out of turn. What you're about to see over the course of the next 9 weeks, and I wrote about this late Friday night and published it earlier on Saturday morning. 9 games is going to tell you, win or lose, what you have on the sideline. Doug Pederson's leadership has been called into question. Lane Johnson, who also misspoke after a tough loss in Dallas, said that it's going to be some heads being cracked. It's not a direct quote, but that's basically what he said. He said guys are going to have to get to practice on time. Guys are going to have to get to meetings on time. You know, everybody took that and ran with that. Doug Pederson, in a press conference, to his credit, answered that, stating that there's traffic in Philadelphia. They're in constant contact with their players. The communication is fine. And any reports of any latency to practice or anything of that nature is understandable and can be explained. Now, I would imagine that football is just like every other form of work. The cure to traffic would be leaving the house earlier. If you have to leave the house an hour early to get to something that's 15 minutes away, you do that. But you want to make sure you're there 5 minutes early, because on time is late. It's very loud in Philadelphia these days. Anonymous sources. Orlando Scandrick, whose career is over, goes on FS1 and appears on both Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. And he goes on The Herd with Colin Cowherd and basically blasts the Eagles. Everybody except Carson Wentz. I'm not used to this from an Eagles team, but I've grown tired of it already. And after just going through this for about a couple of weeks, I'm wondering how Dallas Cowboy fans have gone on with this since the 90s. There's too much drama. It's too loud. It's irritating. Some of my younger cousins would call this messy. And I'm not interested in mess coming out of this Philadelphia Eagles team. Doug Pederson promised us a new norm. The normal that we're starting to see is not what we asked for. Our franchise quarterback is below 500. It's become normal to ask, where's Frank Reich and how can we get him back? It's become normal to see Jim Schwartz do things on game days that make you want to rip your insides out. It's become normal to see the failures, inconsistencies, and borderline ignorance of what we see from our offensive coordinator, Mr. Groh. Let this be a lesson to y'all. I said this a long time ago and y'all thought I was crazy. There's more to being an offensive coordinator than calling plays. And I sat quietly as some of y'all said that Frank Reich did nothing because Doug Pederson called the plays. I hope by now that you've seen that that's inaccurate. This team has a lot of work to do to be good. They've got Buffalo on the horizon, and then it's the Chicago Bears, then it's the New England Patriots, and it's the Seattle Seahawks. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that Buffalo game is very winnable, but it's also very losable. Have you stopped for a second to consider and ponder this? Philadelphia could lose all 4 of those next 4 games. That would give them a 6-game losing streak in the middle of the season, and that would pretty much wreck this season. It's not time to mail it in yet. It's not time to be concerned. It's not time to be afraid. There's plenty of football left to play. 9 games remain. And if you remember, this should look a little like deja vu. Philadelphia was in this exact same spot a year ago. They were 3-4 to start the season. They were 4-6 after 10 games. But they got good enough fast enough. They made a run. And you can argue 1 or 2 plays would have placed them right back in the NFC Championship game for the second time in 2 years. So it's not over. But in order for this team to be good, they're going to have to fix a lot of things. They're going to have to fix them quickly. Because what we're seeing can't continue. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BirdGang Weekly. Sidney Jones sits. Is he done? If we have time, we'll talk a couple of potential trade targets. We give out the Petty Whop Award. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining the broadcast. We're going to take a break. We're going to give you a little old school bus. And we're going to be right back with more.
Be chipping by the trap. I'm not giving up.
We went carnival on the old school bus. Dexter Garcia, whom I love dearly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the broadcast. I've cleared the room. I'm turned up. You can't play carnival music and not get as excited as I am. All right. So in the long run, I was right. Again, you should be used to hearing that by now. Sidney Jones sits out of the Dallas Cowboys game. Where was Sidney Jones, you ask? Here's what we found out. Everyone asked, you got almost nothing from Doug Pederson. Jim Schwartz, who's always a little bit more vocal, said that there was a defined role for Sidney Jones in the Dallas Cowboys game. He was serving in the role of the backup slot corner. The backup slot corner. A man you spent a second round draft selection on. Now let's defend Philadelphia. Now, I've proven convincingly on ITI, and if you've heard me on other broadcasts, I've proved convincingly that Joe Douglas and that experiment was a failure. Joe Douglas equates to some Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly's tenure in Philadelphia will always be remembered as a failure, and it was. But there are some silver linings that came out of that dark cloud. He's the guy that drafted Lane Johnson. He's the guy that drafted Zach Ertz. Sure, that's like a 20% success rate over everything else we've seen with him. But grabbing two potential future Hall of Famers and it being done under his watch means he has to get a little bit of credit for that. Joe Douglas drafted Derek Barnett. The jury is still out. In the second round, he took Sidney Jones. The jury is still out, but it looks like they're heading toward a guilty determination. Rasul Douglas. Decent. Probably needs to play safety, not a great corner. Unfortunately, though, one of the best we have, if not the best. Donnell Pumphrey was a Joe Douglas product. So was Shelton Gibson. So was Elijah Qualls. I had to Google that draft to even remember that Elijah Qualls was drafted. We got Dallas Goedert a season ago. That looks like that's going to be a win. We lucked up on Avant Maddox in the fourth round, but it looks like that would be a win. Then he took a rugby player that we just want to make good in Jordan Mailata because we think the story is cute. We like the idea of a rugby guy coming in, playing a little football, and they turning that into a success story. They tried it also with Adam Zaruba. They wanted to make him a tight end. That failed. What else we got from Joe Douglas? Clayton Thorson. He's now in the practice squad with the Dallas Cowboys, and we took him this year. Look at Joe Douglas's draft. I wrote about this probably about a week ago. That blew up in our faces, and now they're paying for it. Notably, in the existence of Sidney Jones. The theory was Philly was pretty much decent at corner, and what we had the right and what we could do was we could take a second round corner who probably would have been a first rounder. Because as much as I bash him, I would like to believe, although some of you don't, you can't call somebody a bust because of injury. That person has to at least be healthy enough to play and have the chance at being successful. And then we can determine whether or not there's bust stock or not. So Sidney Jones was not a bust. He's a failure, not as a person, but as a player. And we failed as an organization by taking him. But he's not a bust. Sidney Jones would have been a first rounder. And had he not have torn his Achilles in a pro day at Washington, he would have been. That caused him to slide. He lands in the second round. Philly decides to experiment. If we take this guy and he works back from that Achilles injury, there's no reason why to believe that he shouldn't. We take this guy, we basically redshirt him and get him back in his sophomore season. This could be good. It hasn't been good, ladies and gentlemen. It's been awful. My ITI staff, and I love them dearly, my good friend Justin Grasso, my co-editor over at Inside the Eagles, defended him to me. And I trust Justin's judgment. Justin's one of the smartest people I know. But we went in opposite ways. I let him talk me into it. And I think if you ask Justin, he will admit he came over to my side. Derek McCauley, one of our good contributors over there at Inside the Eagles, defended Sidney Jones to me. I believe it was on this show. Sidney Jones cannot play. And a guy that we spent a second round pick. If you spend a second round pick on somebody, they're supposed to produce. They're supposed to be difference makers on a team. Sidney Jones has not been a difference maker. He is not producing. He's always on the wrong side of highlights. That has failed. But as a second rounder, I'm not sure if this team at this point, as he heads into this is year 3 for him. He'll be heading into year 4 next season. He's almost too expensive to get rid of. And he's almost too much of an unfinished product that you can trade him and get rid of him. Which brings me to Nelson Agholor. Take everything I said, minus the injury and the Achilles tear, and you can almost say the same thing about Nelson Agholor. Now, Eagles fans are split on this. Nelson Agholor is so bad that he can cost Zach Ertz a long catch and touchdown run in Seattle when the game was still winnable because he can't line up right. He's also good enough to do some of the things that we saw from him in 2017 during Philly's Super Bowl run. And ladies and gentlemen, let me say this wholeheartedly. And if you know anything about football, you'll agree with this. The Eagles may not have won that Super Bowl without Nelson Agholor. Timely catches at the right time. The jet sweep in the divisional round of the playoffs. That opening touchdown catch of the season from Carson Wentz in Washington, D.C. that ended a long losing streak to them. Nelson Agholor has done some good things. He was a Chip Kelly draft pick in the first round. Now, I don't believe, and I've never believed that Nelson Agholor was worth a first rounder. But what that does make him is expensive. And I said prior to the 2016 season, and I said it prior to the 2019 season, the Eagles needed to go in another direction and get rid of Nelson Agholor. They did not. That has blown up in their face. So now you hear Howie Roseman's lost his touch because he doesn't land every single person that says they want out of the current situation that they're in with their team. Howie Roseman is now a failure because fans somehow believe that this is fantasy football and you can trade for anybody and get them just because you want them. But all the blame that we sometimes heap unfairly on Howie Roseman needs to actually go to Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas ruined this team and left. Just like Chip Kelly ruined this team and left. But has Chip Kelly not taken Nelson Agholor in the first round, the Eagles may not have won that Lombardi trophy. That must be stated. But what must also be stated is Nelson Agholor is awful. Nelson Agholor dropped a potential game-winning touchdown in Atlanta. That's Atlanta's only win of the season, by the way. The one game they played against Philadelphia. Nelson Agholor a week ago went alligator arms in Arlington, against the Dallas Cowboys. And then what Nelson Agholor did after that is inexcusable. I know you saw it. Nelson Agholor made a comment that Nelson Agholor has no business making. Nelson Agholor went on record and basically threw Carson Wentz under the bus. Anybody that wants to see that drop again, if you haven't seen it, I don't know how you haven't, but anybody that wants to see that drop again by Nelson Agholor, it's not even a drop. You actually have to have it touch your hands for it to be a drop. There's a ball that lands literally about 6 inches in front of his face. All he has to do is put his arms out and he'll catch it. He made no effort to catch the ball. And this is what he said in his defense. I was trying to get open. I was hauling tail. Making a move on the safety and using the space that I had run across the field. And by the time I was trying to track it, the ball was already out of position. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a lie. But he went on. I wish I would have been able to get there. That also is a lie. He was there. I don't know what has happened. That's the first accurate and honest statement he's made in this whole comment. I don't know if and that meant Wentz. I don't know if he was rushed or whatever, but we had enough field and I was trying to get to it. Basically saying, maybe there was something that happened back there with wrists. Maybe I couldn't see it. I was too busy getting open and doing my job. I don't know what happened, but I did everything I could to get the ball. It was just out of position. Maybe if Wentz, isn't rushed or whatever was going on with him, maybe if he had dropped it a little bit in a better place for me, maybe I could have come up with the play. Nelson Agholor has no business making this comment. And he's about to get some heat for this one. When Nelson Agholor couldn't line up, got called for an illegal formation that cost the Eagles a touchdown. Zach Ertz defended him. Carson Wentz defended him. Doug Pederson defended him. And then he went on the air and started talking about how he was in his own head. And as we should, as Eagles fans, because we're understanding and we're human, said, uh-oh. Because all of us know somebody who suffered from mental illness. We thought, and Doug Pederson was right by saying this, Doug said that he was going to talk to him and make sure that everything was okay with him. And kudos. I'm clapping in the studio. Kudos for Doug Pederson for recognizing that and doing so. Mental illness is real, and we all should take a more staunch approach in making sure that we take it seriously and we help those who are affected by it. But we learned that Nelson Agholor is not sick. Nelson Agholor is okay. But he was defended. He was defended by this fan base. And after a horrible season in 2016, there was an open practice at Lincoln Financial Field in 2017 where the loudest ovation arguably was for Nelson Agholor. The fans continued to support him. And they showed love to him through 2017. And if you ask Nelson Agholor, he appreciated that. But this is the Philadelphia Eagles fan base. This is Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia media. When you do well, we will pat you on the back. If you earn those wings on your helmet, we will love you. And if you're stinking it up, we'll let you know that too. I'm going to read this to you again. I was trying to get open. I was hauling tail, making a move on the safety and using the space that I had run across the field. And by the time I was trying to track it, the ball was already out of position. I wish I would have been able to get there. I don't know what happened. I don't know if he was rushed or whatever, but we had enough field. Meaning get it out there a little bit better, Carson. Make a better throw for me. And I was trying to get to it. Nelson Agholor is wrong. And Nelson Agholor is smart. He knew what he was doing. And you can defend all of them you want to. You know what he was doing too. He's trying to pass the buck here. This isn't my fault. But this is why he's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Because Carson Wentz has always had his back. When he dropped the game-winning touchdown pass in Atlanta, Carson defended him. And Carson came back to him. And kudos to Nelson. He helped put him in a position to win. He made a more difficult catch later with the game on the line. But this team has always defended Nelson Agholor, and we're sick of the excuses. And Carson Wentz, of anybody, should have challenged him on this. I want you to notice something. Notice how every time we have quotes, we have names to back them up. We can rule out Nelson Agholor as being the anonymous source. He takes every opportunity to talk to the media and do it on television. We know it's not Malcolm Jenkins. Who's more outspoken than him? I have never seen Malcolm Jenkins. Maybe he's done it, but I've never seen it. I've never seen Malcolm Jenkins make a statement and not put his name behind it. Just look at how he blasted Orlando Scandrick. Now, at this certain point, I felt like he should have let it go because we got a game to play. It's Friday, and we're talking about Orlando Scandrick more than we're talking about the Buffalo Bills. And we're talking about drama, and we're talking about whether or not Coach Pederson has the team together, and we're talking about whether or not this team is focused and whether or not this team is disciplined. We have never questioned the discipline of a Philadelphia Eagles team. Not one in this era. Not since that dream team thing where there were Jason Babbins and all those guys running around who did what they wanted to do. And that ultimately led to some of the demise of Andy Reid. They thought his voice had gotten stale and that he no longer had any control of his locker room. Doug Peterson's leadership is being called into question. It sounds like he doesn't have the guys on a tight enough leash. It sounds like he's not leading them the way that he's supposed to be doing so. It sounds like he's lost control. It sounds like his voice has gotten stale. And if it has gotten stale in what? His fourth year? That's a problem. You're going to learn a lot about what you have on the sideline. I don't care if the Eagles go 0-6 over this stretch. And I don't care if the Eagles go 0-4 in the next 4 games. If we see Pederson answer the call with his coaching and reel this team back in. If we see the Eagles' best efforts and they lose these next 4 games, nobody's going to complain. We will complain if we get 4 more games that look like the last 2. The problem now is because no one wanted to listen to me or people that think like me, we're stuck with Nelson Agholor to some extent. You were never going to get more for Nelson Agholor than you would have gotten for him prior to 2016. You probably could have gotten high draft picks that we probably would have screwed up with Joe Douglas running the show. You're never going to get more now for Nelson Agholor than you would have got for him prior to this season. But there is a theory. It was reported, and Justin Grosso, my co-editor over at Inside the Eagles, wrote about this yesterday. There's a trade proposal that involves a possible reunion with Nelson Agholor and Frank Wright. There's a trade that could potentially send Nelson Agholor to the Colts. The compensation in that trade would be a 2024 round pick from Indy, which a lot of people think we'll screw up anyway, and I totally agree with that. But at least you got something. And at this point, I'm not so sure that the Eagles don't need a clean house. Sometimes you have to take a step backward to take a step forward. And this is a very old team all of a sudden. They probably would have been older had they hit on to Michael Bennett. But now you have to watch the Cowboys trade for him. As if Wentz didn't get murdered enough, now there's still another game with Dallas, and Michael Bennett will be in the fold. To go along with Robert Quinn and DeMarcus Lawrence and all these other pass rushers they have. Dallas is serious about winning. And it sounds like the Eagles are not. Who would have thought that leading into this season? If you can get a 4th-round pick for Nelson Agholor, take it. This team has to get young. They have to get young in a hurry. And I sincerely suggest these guys who are at the end of their contracts, Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, these guys got to go. You can't just let them play, stink it up, let them walk out the door and get nothing for them. I came up. Let me first say that there's also a trade rumor that we could still possibly get rid of Halapuli Vaitai. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Halapuli Vaitai is now the backup at probably 2 different positions, guard and also at right tackle. The left tackle, the backup now is Andre Dillard. Jason Peters was, and always will be the starter as long as he's able to stand up. The Eagles should have probably moved on from Jason Peters too. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings. This is a very expensive team with a lot of old guys that we're holding sentimental value for. This is not a nursing home. You don't put them up. You don't start sending them checks. Halapuli Vaitai could possibly go to the Browns. Now, the question is, what would they get back from the Browns in return? Let's hope, because the Cleveland Browns have always set the Eagles up by making bad decisions. They basically gave us Donovan McNabb, and they basically gave us Carson Wentz. But the Cleveland Browns always seem to fall asleep behind the wheel whenever they're talking to the Philadelphia Eagles, and maybe Philly can trick them again. Maybe they can get them to part with a decent young corner. Maybe they can get them to part with a decent young wide receiver. If they could get a speedster like Antonio Callaway from the Browns for Halapuli Vaitai, I'm all over it. Do it. That's the Halapuli Vaitai rumor. I have 2 possible trade scenarios that include Nelson Agholor. I wrote about these Friday on Inside the Eagles. Trade Nelson Agholor to the Bengals for A.J. Green. The Bengals had some injuries in the secondary, but they kind of sound like Philly to some extent. They may get some guys back, which means they'll have an overabundance of nice young talent at cornerback. The Bengals need a lot of things to get good. They're fiercely loyal to players, but they need a lot to fill a lot of holes. And maybe we can talk them into giving us one of those great corners they have. I wouldn't call William Jackson great, but I call him good. And I take him over Nelson Agholor. Dre Kirkpatrick, I think, is very good. He's a former first round, and as was Agholor. Dre Kirkpatrick wouldn't be in need to sign immediately because he's signed through 2021, but he's very pricey for the Cincinnati Bengals. And here's the other thing about Dre Kirkpatrick. The Eagles can afford it. I think they're a little bit under. They're somewhere, I think last look, I'm doing this off the top of my head, I think they were somewhere between 25 and 28 million under the salary cap. If everything stands as it is now, they're looking at like $40 million to spend next season. They can afford to bring Dre Kirkpatrick in. And I have no issue with some of the theory that some people have stated where they give up a high draft pick in order to get a sure thing at one of these positions, especially if they're young. There's not a first rounder coming out in this class that's as good as Dre Kirkpatrick. There may not be another first rounder coming out in this class that's better than Patrick Pederson. Some of you believe that Patrick Pederson is like 35 years old. He's actually 29, and he won't turn 30 until next July. He's the other option I mentioned as a possible trade target for Patrick Pederson. And I also like the Arizona thing because this could possibly be a package. Perhaps Agholor. Now, Patrick Pederson is good. I don't think Patrick Pederson is what he was, and I think Patrick Pederson can be had from time to time. But Patrick Pederson, even at 29 years old, is better than everything we have. You don't believe Ronald Darby's better than Patrick Pederson. You don't believe Jalen Mills is better than Patrick Pederson. Avant Maddox isn't better than Patrick Pederson. If you can get Patrick Pederson, but that may also be expensive. He's pricey as far as his price tag, and the Cards may want a draft pick and a player. Hopefully Nelson Agholor for Patrick Pederson. Patrick Pederson also doesn't represent Philly having to do anything for like another season. He signed through 2020. Good options for the Eagles. I support both of them. Ladies and gentlemen, are you worried? It's no reason at all to be ashamed if you are. If you're worried, I would actually be willing to go so far as to say this. There are a lot of people who share your concern. There are a lot of people who are also worried as well. But keep this in mind. If this is any sort of silver lining for that dark cloud that you see hovering over your days lately, this team was in the exact same spot in 2018. They were 3-4. They started 4-6. They ended up winning, I believe, 5 of their last 6. They marched in the playoffs, albeit with Nick Foles. Can you imagine me and Carson Wentz every day you have to walk past the statue of Nick Foles and Doug Pederson calling the Philly special in the Super Bowl? He's become Steve Young, the great young quarterback who follows a legend. Because at this point, there are some people who say that Nick Foles is the greatest quarterback in Eagles history. He's the one that got us the Super Bowl. And if you look at his numbers, and if we were somehow able to expand them over the course of several seasons, had Chip Kelly not given him away for Sam Bradford, we might have another sample size. We may have never seen Carson Wentz in an Eagles jersey. A lot of people believe now that Nick Foles deserves the honor of being labeled the greatest quarterback in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's not a ridiculous statement. But if you're worried, don't be. Yes, Carson Wentz is 8-10 in his last 18 starts as a Philadelphia Eagle. Yes, it wasn't supposed to be this way. But Carson Wentz is talented enough. This team is talented enough that they can turn it around. And I think they will. These next 4 games decide this season. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention because they're all 4 very losable games. But here's the other thing. The Cowboys haven't played some of these same teams the Eagles have to play. They're playing a lot of the same teams. They're just playing them in different order. The Cowboys have to play the Patriots too. The Cowboys have to play the Bills too. Think about that. Let that sink in. They got to play Chicago. They got to play Minnesota. 8-8 might be good enough to win the NFC East. That is sad. but it's truth. She was our guest on the most recent edition of the Thunderstorm. You listen to BirdGang Weekly. Thank you for tuning in. Tesla Naya, a very good friend of mine, Bad Habits, and then I'm giving her out the Petty Wop Award.
We all have skeletons in the closet. Some of that stuff you just don't forget. I got my own problems to deal with. Now you want me to deal with yours. Like you're drinking, smoking, and lying and cheating. When you get caught, you wanna be all that crying. And you're out there selling and buying. Boy, I'm so ashamed. And you want me to have your last name. You say you got some bad habits. Just a habit you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with the BS. Some bad habits. Just a few you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with that BS. Don't ask me to forgive and forget. Thinking I would just deal with it. And all that I'll do better, baby, next time. There's no next time. Somebody must be playing with your mind. Take your bad habits, cause I draw the line. You can pack your wait, you don't have no don't you come round here no more. No more. You say you got some bad habits. Just a few you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. No, you can miss me with your nose. You got some bad habits. Just a few you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with your BS. You got some bad habits. You got some bad. Just a habit you forgot to mention. Oh no, oh no. What's your intentions? I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with the BS. Good girls don't like losers. 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 Take your bad habits. Take your bad habits. I don't want 'em. No, I don't want 'em. No. Take your bad habits. Take your bad habits. I don't want 'em. No, no, I don't want 'em. No. You say you got some bad habits. Just a few you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with this. You got some bad habits. Just a few you forgot to mention. I wanna know what's your intentions. I don't have time for silly lines. You can miss me with that BS.
You better get it, Tesla Nay. What else could you ask for? I have officially given you everything I can give you. I've given you brilliant insight, as always. I have given you a little carnival. And now I've given you a little soul on BirdGang Weekly. You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to BirdGang Weekly. For those of y'all that asked that we go on earlier in the week, let me say this. BirdGang Weekly is probably going to be heard more frequently than once a week now, as we get more involved in the season, as I free up my time, as I become a better steward of my time. BirdGang Weekly may actually be more than a once a week broadcast, but we have been holding broadcasts to later in the week because the best stories come out later in the week. We know who's going to play. We know all kinds of things. And had we gone on Tuesday, as we originally thought we would have missed this one. The Petty Wop Award is easy. And if you know anything, you've already figured out who it's going to. Orlando Scandrick is the winner of the Petty Wop Award. I thought when I was 18 years old, when I had my heart broke for the first time, that the world was over. I thought no woman was ever going to love me again. My father told me to stop crying because there were billions of women on this planet. And for some reason, I thought that was the worst advice I ever heard. But my father was right. More relationships came. I met more women. I meet women every day. I know very good women who would make somebody a good wife and they're single. And they're not even dating. All they do is go to work and they go home. Relationships come and go. A boyfriend or a girlfriend will come and go. Hopefully you won't lose a wife or a husband. Hopefully you guys will stay married until God calls you home. But occasionally, we're adults. There are divorces. It is okay to move on from relationships, especially if they're unhealthy. It is not okay to move on from that relationship and start trashing the person you were in the relationship with. Especially if you're a man. That makes you a clown. If you start going public and you decide that what you want to do is you want to start trashing teammates to other people, that's fine. But don't be surprised if people are going to look at you with a side eye. Orlando Scandrick is a clown. He wasn't quite an anonymous source, but he was close. He waited until he was all the way out of the building. And he waited until he went all the way over to the West Coast. He got out of Philly. He went to L.A. and he appeared on Undisputed, Skip and Shannon on FS1. And then later on that day, he appeared on FS1's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. And he went on to bash the Eagles. He also called the Dallas Cowboys a class organization. So that shows you how valid his opinion is. The Dallas Cowboys are a class organization. And they were a class organization when he was there. Yeah, right, dude. Orlando Scandrick has lost the respect of so many people in the NFL. You don't have to take my word for it. Look at your own life. If somebody came into the job who was new, the last person in, they were underperforming, and then they left and they talked junk about the vice president of the company, and they talked junk about the employees at the company, and they were very derogatory comments that they made about one of the team leads or managers at the company. We'll call him Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins is the manager or a team lead. And while you're at work, it's, hey man, that's what I'm talking about, bro. That's why you're in a leadership position. That's how you blank do it. That's leadership, bruh. I respect you, bruh. And then you leave the company. Maybe the firing was fair. Maybe it was unfair. But you leave the company. And then you talk junk about the team lead who you had just said to his face. You talked him up. Popped him on the chest. Proud to be working with you, bruh. And then when you leave, man, he's not a leader. He's not this. He's not that. Now, it is illegal to get a professional reference, call someone, and ask someone about their job performance. You're only allowed to ask whether that person worked for the company or not. But you and I both know. You live in the same city. You work in the same city. Guys are in the same field. They know each other. You're a salesman. A guy quits another company. He wants to come sell at your... You know the manager at the other company. People are trading your personal stock all the time. And we all saw what Orlando Scandrick said on television. And he did it in the biggest Cowboy fan the biggest Cowboy homer on television, Skip Bayless, who was just looking for an opportunity to bash the Eagles and something about them, and Orlando Scandrick gave him the bait. Would you trust that man to come work for you? Would you want to work with that guy? You have a cubicle that has 2 seats in it. You want that guy sitting with you? Orlando Scandrick says, you never know. I may play football again, but I think I'll try to get into television. So what do we do, Orlando? We're going to make up lies to create an interesting story? Mr. Scandrick, your last 15 minutes of fame are up. You were an average corner in the NFL. You were on 3 teams in the last 2 seasons. Nobody even remembers when you were good. You had a highlight reel performance against the Jets with the Philadelphia Eagles. Congratulations. And then you totally whiffed on a tackle of Ezekiel Elliott. Looked like you were scared to tackle him. I hope you get into television because your NFL career is over. And even if you get into television, what is it you're going to say? Are we just going to make up stories for the sake of being entertaining? That won't last long. Are we going to bash former employers when we go somewhere else? Are we going to join the FS1 staff, get fired there because I don't have any real news to report? You talking about hashtag fake news? This is it. And then when you let go by FS1, are we then going to go to the NFL Network and talk trash about your former employer at FS1? Nobody's going to trust you. No team is going to trust you. Nobody's going to welcome you into their locker room unless it's the Dallas Cowboys, because you seem to be very complimentary of them. But don't expect, he also complimented the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't expect to go there. A lot of guys there got ties to guys in Philadelphia, one of which is their head coach. Their head coach has respect for Doug Pederson. And their head coach has respect for Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. Don't think you're going to go to Kansas City getting a job. Maybe you get a job at Dallas. You maybe even get a recurring role on Skip and Shannon. Skip Bayless seems to love you, but your NFL career is over. Your last 15 minutes of fame are up. Oh, and lo and behold, check out Philadelphia Eagles on social media. Check out their Twitter. Check out their Facebook. Orlando Scandrick forgot that Malcolm Jenkins was mic'd up. And the same man that bashed him 2 days later, questioned his leadership, had so many ugly things to say about his team. He is all over it when he's face to face with the guy. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a coward. Congratulations. The Petty Wop Award was reintroduced to Thunderstorm Media last week. It was given out on BirdGang Weekly last week to the anonymous source. This week, hands down, Orlando Scandrick, you, sir, win the Petty Wop Award. And you're probably more deserving of it than the guy who was the anonymous source. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my time. Thank you for listening. Check me out every single day on InsideTheEagles.com on the Fansided Network. Follow at Inside Eagles on Twitter. Follow me at GQ_4_EVA. That's my social media everywhere. IG. I have a Facebook page. Follow Thunderstorm Media. I actually have a Snapchat as well. I don't know how to use Snapchat or what it's for, but I do have a Snapchat at GQ_4_EVA. Follow at Storm Radio 66 on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the brilliant writers at Inside the Eagles on Twitter. I appreciate them. They make my job easy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun. We'll talk to you on next time we go out with another banger by my homegirl. I've given you everything. I gave you Carnival with Desta Garcia. I'm giving you the BirdGang Weekly Soul Cafe with Tess Lene. God bless y'all. We'll see y'all next time.
got red beans and rice when I get hungry. He serves me sometimes twice.